Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
And here we go.
Live from the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina, welcome to episode 85 of the Confirmed Epic Podcast, the official podcast of theepicreview.com and proudly presented by the Geeks Worldwide Radio Network. I'm one of your hosts, the real Brad Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is not just a podcasting partner, but one of my best friends, Jerry Reed, also known as
Barbecue 17. Hey everybody, what's going on?
And it could not be more fitting for anybody else but Barbecue 17, aka Jerry Reed, joining us tonight for episode 85 of the pod, because tonight we're doing something that we've done pretty annually on the Confirmed Epic Podcast. We are covering Toy Fair, New York Toy Fair 2018. If you don't know what that is, Jerry, why don't you tell our listeners just what Toy Fair is, and then second half of the show will be all about that, so they know what they're in store for this evening.
Absolutely. So the New York Toy Fair is a trade show. You know, San Diego Comic-Con is really intended for fans. Things like New York Toy Fair and whatnot are typically, New York Comic-Con typically intended for fans, but New York Toy Fair, which we're looking at right now, is really a trade show. It is for the people who are buying product for large stores. And so originally that was exactly who the New York Toy Fair was for. It was simply for buyers, buyers from large department stores and toy stores. It's been around for a long time. The New York Toy Fair is pretty old. It's been around since, gosh, what did we see in the show? I say about 1903. 1908. Yeah, so it's well over 100 years old. And what has evolved over time is that now we see a lot of media outlets that cater directly to fans, and we see people who cater, companies do presentations that really do cater to fans, or we might say they really cater to the e-tailers who carry a lot of these lines. A number of years ago, there was kind of the traditional companies where, those big box stores like Kmart, Walmart, Target, Toys R Us, various toy stores. And over time, we've seen those stores sort of decrease in their importance. And we've seen a lot of the lines that are shown off at Toy Fair are really only handled through places, maybe big online places like Amazon, but also stores like Entertainment Earth or Big Bad Toy Store. Those companies are the ones who are carrying this product as well. So New York Toy Fair has definitely evolved. It's a trade event versus a fan event, kind of like how E3 used to be, although over the past few years that's evolved as well. And one of the things for me, I remember Toy Fair, always having been a big deal since I started following it in the early mid-90s. But back then, if you wanted Toy Fair news, you had to wait for publications like Lee's Action Figure News and Toy Review or Wizard and Toy Fair to post their coverage about a month later. And now we can actually follow Toy Fair live and even watch some of the panels and hear a little bit of what's going on. So I'm excited to talk about Toy Fair today because I've been thinking about it all week.
Yeah, and we've been looking forward to it since 2018 rang in. This is one of the biggest events in geekdom for this podcast, I know, because Jerry's main thing as far as how he displays his geekdom is his collecting and his toy reviews on Action Figure Barbecue, and it's something that I care deeply about too. Jerry mentioned BigBadToyStore.com. That's where we pre-order a lot, if not most of our stuff.
My pre-orders jumped up like crazy this weekend.
Yeah, a lot of stuff hit on the Big Bad as far as pre-orders. BigBadToyStore.com. You can pre-order and you can cancel without any penalty. And it's now $4 flat rate shipping. So they also offer the pile of loot where if you have massive amounts of stuff like Jerry does often, you can let it build up and ship it all at once instead of getting a lot of little shipments, which really comes in handy when you order a lot of stuff. So Thank you to BigBadToyStore.com for sponsoring us in the past. We absolutely love that site. This is a big show, so in order to accommodate a big week in Epic News and New York Toy Fair, we've decided to cut what we've been checking out this week. That segment will return in Confirmed Epic Podcast episode 86, where we will review Black Panther, so I'm looking forward to that. Don't forget, you can buy our shirts, including the brand new Geeks Worldwide logo t-shirt at tpublic.com/user/TheRealBradBell. This show drops live on iTunes every Friday, and SoundCloud and many other podcasting services, and including YouTube, but we always broadcast and record live on Tuesday nights. So however you're listening, whether it's live on YouTube, whether you're click and play on SoundCloud, or you've downloaded us to your smartphone, we greatly appreciate it. So Jerry, let's go ahead and get into the epic news for this week.
All right, let's talk about it.
The first bit of epic news kind of spins out of what we were talking about last week, Jerry. Last week we reviewed Gotham by Gaslight in the episode 84 of the pod, which was an original DC animated film. And apparently there's another one of those on the way that I wasn't aware of. You know, I'd heard about Hell to Pay, the Suicide Squad one coming out in February. But there's going to be a dubbed Batman Ninja film that's hitting Blu-ray, I believe, May 7th, and is going to hit video on demand services before that. So basically, the plot of this movie is Gorilla Grodd puts Batman in feudal Japan, and there's incarnations of all his, or some of his classic villains and almost all of his classic allies. Jerry, this looks like a hell of a lot of fun. I know you got this pre-ordered through Amazon. What'd you think when you first saw this trailer?
I'm pretty excited for it. It looks like it can be fun. You know, I think you have to approach it with the right mindset. But I'm excited. I've always been a fan of the Legends of Batman line, the older toy line from Kenner in the mid-90s. That was kind of the point of the line, was to imagine that Batman existed during all these time periods. And so, you know, there'd be like Samurai Batman, or Knight, you know, like Knight in Shining Armor Batman, or future Batmans. So I'm always interested to see, you know, Batman displaced and put somewhere else. We talked about that last week, but I've always been a big Elseworlds fan, and I'm kind of interested in this.
And I can't remember if it was Play Kai Arts or SH Figure Arts that are actually doing Joker and Batman figures for these. That are coming out this summer.
I think it's SH Figure Arts, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
I might be wrong on that.
I'm pretty sure it's SH, and they look really cool. They look very faithful to the source material. If you've seen this trailer, I think they're going for between $60 and $70, which most of their stuff goes for. So the Batman, if you enjoy that film, maybe that's something you can add to your collection. You can pre-order that now at BigBadToyStore.com. But yeah, looking forward to it. Definitely an episode in May. We'll dedicate that as our featured review. It just looks like a lot of fun. Plus, I'm going to enjoy seeing Batman match wits with Grodd, even if it's not directly. I think that'd be a cool little twist, something we don't see a lot.
When I first heard about this, I actually thought this was maybe going to be... just with the name, I thought it was going to be part of the Nightfall storyline, when Batman was like when he had to train and stuff, retrain and stuff, and
when he broke his back.
Yeah, after that, wore the mask of Tengu. I thought maybe that was going to be what this was about, until I saw the art for it.
It looks intentionally kind of cheesy, like Jerry said. You got to approach it with the right mind, that you're basically watching a dub Batman anime. And if you do that, I think you're going to have a hell of a good time with it. But we look forward to that this May. Jerry, big news in the horror world this week. Fangoria, which is a legendary horror magazine from the 80s, from the 90s, and I believe the late 70s as well. It's a staple among horror aficionados, and I know it's been missed within that community for a long time. But Fangoria has announced that they're going to begin releasing the magazine once again. It will be a quarterly magazine, so we're only getting it every couple months. But still, I think this is really cool news in the horror community, Jerry.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember always going into, like the Walden Books and Barnes and Noble and the places that were in the mall, and I would always flip through these.
I was always a little young to be getting Fangoria when it was in its heyday.
Yeah, I never had a subscription to it. I don't know that I only ever bought probably like 1 or 2 copies because it's pretty violent inside, and certainly not something my parents were going to buy me. So I had to like sneak over and look at it, while they were looking at something else.
Yeah, and right now I think the most popular horror magazine out there on newsstands is Rue Morgue.
Rue Morgue is a big one, yeah.
And that's a really cool magazine, but that focuses kind of on horror all over the world and kind of different elements of horror, not just film, even though film is a big focus of that magazine. So I do think for cinephiles that are horror fans, this is going to be a welcome return to their geek routine.
Yeah. Not been gone terribly long. I think it was sporadic like the past couple years, so it's nice that they've kind of turned things around and are able to keep it going. I mean, we're definitely seeing a lot of these print publications, disappear, which is
sad.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about it, that when we were talking about Toy Fair, I mean, in the past when we had toy magazines as our primary source of information, I mean, obviously you had to wait a month or more to know about some of these things, and you were limited based on what was covered. At the same time, when somebody writes a really good article or a reference piece, I mean, I still keep my issues of Toy Fair and go back to them for various reasons. Sometimes for, the great reference guides that they would print, or certain articles on the history of Toyline, sometimes just because they were a lot of fun to read as well. So hopefully moving forward, with print media, we recognize that it still has its place. It's just not, it's never going to be up to date like online sources at this point that are updated automatically.
There's something cool about that. I've recently, at the beginning of last summer movie season, I got big into Empire Film Podcast and the Empire Film Magazine.
Empire's
subscribed
a great
to
magazine.
That. It is fantastic if you're a cinephile, and just the interviews they get and how much they look back at old films, including like old 80s action films and stuff. It is just a treat to read, and a lot of times they pile up for me because I just get so busy with life, and I read comics and whatnot in my spare time, but I always find time to go back and catch up on a few articles. And even though that stuff's dated, like you said, it doesn't diminish the quality of writing and the quality of production when you talk about those exclusive Empire photographs that do make their way online, but are always exclusive to the magazine first. So I recommend Empire. I'm definitely going to be checking out the first couple issues of Fangoria just to see what that is like, and check that out. I think it's going to be launching next year, I believe. So look for that in 2019. Speaking of horror, let's go to the creator of American Horror Story, Mr. Ryan Murphy, also the creator of American Crime Story. And those are two big shows for FX right now. But probably the most famous showrunner going in all of TV drama, Ryan Murphy, has just inked a 5-year exclusive $300 million deal with Netflix. And there's a lot of questions here. What we don't know is if future seasons of American Horror Story, I know they have at least 2 more planned out, and future stories of American Crime Story, I know they have the Monica Lewinsky scandal scheduled, and the one on Hurricane Katrina scheduled. I don't know if they're going to jump to Netflix. I know they're going to finish airing American Crime Story on FX. It's the assassination of Versace right now. That's on FX. I haven't watched it, but I've heard great things about it on many other podcasts and media from many other media outlets. But I mean, this is big deal in the TV world that Netflix could get their hands on its showrunner whose properties have a built-in fan base. Can you imagine, Jerry, if American Horror Story finishes and it's exclusive to Netflix this last 3 seasons? I mean, it's already on there. It comes on there.
Right.
But the fact that it would debut on there, that could be huge. I know you like American Horror Story, as
Yeah,
do I. What are your thoughts on this?
I've seen the first 4 seasons. I'd like to watch the rest of them. So it'd definitely be interesting. They could, they could do whatever they wanted to with that format. You know, Netflix allows folks to play around a lot more than a traditional show on a network does. With how long it is, or, you know.
What they can get away with, too. Now, they push the envelope on American Horror Story, but on Netflix, you're looking at prestige television format.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go hard R rating on some elements of American Horror Story if you wanted to.
I mean, you could drop it however, whenever you wanted to, or change the length of episodes. So it's going to be interesting to see if that is a show that makes that leap, to see what they do with it.
Yeah, and big news in the TV world. Keep an eye out for that. Ryan Murphy is a somewhat controversial guy with some of the things he says. He's a bit off of the cuff sometimes, but there's no doubt that his shows are really entertaining television. So, speaking of things that might not be so entertaining, let's talk about Paramount and the Transformers franchise. So, Transformers 5 didn't perform up to box office expectations, which wasn't surprising to many, although those movies always do relatively well at the box office. We reviewed it like 3 times on the Confirmed Epic podcast. Somebody paid and donated for Andrew Stokes' ticket, so he would have to review that, Jerry.
Yes,
I don't know if you remember that.
It was not me.
No, it was one of our listeners.
Yeah, I don't know
it was
who
Timothy Belmont.
Okay.
One of our big listeners.
Thank you,
he lives
Timothy.
out there. Yeah, he lives outside of Seattle. So shout out to Tim. Thank you for listening and promoting the podcast for us. We appreciate all of our listeners. But Paramount is looking to reboot the Transformers franchise. Now, they got Bumblebee scheduled for this holiday season, which is a 1980s origin story for that character, starring, yes, John Cena. But
wait, what?
That was supposed. Yeah, John Cena's in the Bumblebee movie.
John Cena's in the Bumblebee movie?
And Haley Steinfeld, who was in the remake of True Grit, and she is a pop star now, so she's kind of returning back to film. But her and I think John Cena's playing her dad. But this was supposed to start off like the Transformers cinematic universe and spin-offs and whatnot. But apparently it's going to be the end of this incarnation of the Transformers cinematic universe.
Because Hasbro's wanting to do a shared universe at this point. Hasbro's kind of maybe wanting to do something with G.I. Joe and Micronauts. Again, G.I. Joe's another property a few years ago that they pushed into movies. One movie, Rise of Cobra wasn't that great. Retaliation was pretty good. It's pretty entertaining.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, but
we reviewed that on the podcast, like episode 10 or 11.
Yeah, I remember that. So, but Hasbro's wanting to do their shared universe as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they try to, mix together G.I. Joe, Micronauts, maybe like Visionaries. Some of those weird 80s Hasbro properties that didn't get a lot of attention, but they're trying to bring them back in some way.
That would be, everybody wants the shared universe.
Mask.
I think
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, Mask is in there. I think this is a good idea to kind of get the Michael Bay stench off of Transformers. That's talking from someone who enjoyed the first and third Transformers film. Didn't love them, but I definitely enjoyed them, especially the first one. And if people tell you they didn't like the first one, they're probably lying, because that movie was a massive hit back in the summer of 2007. Yeah. But I think that this is definitely a viable property that they can do some really special things with if they let somebody kind of be the creative chief, like Kevin Feige is to Marvel and Kathleen Kennedy is with Star Wars, who really understands and cares for that Transformers property the way so many of us fans do. And I think if they really do that and embrace it, and they put the right people in the writer's room and don't just make it a cash grab, I think this could be actually really good news for fans of the Transformers franchise, Jerry.
Yeah.
So, Jerry, let's talk about some comic book news here. Big news broke today that Marvel would be doing a line-wide reboot, but not just a normal line-wide reboot like they pretty much do annually at this point. But a line-wide reboot that they compared, the new editor-in-chief at Marvel's, I think his name's Sobolski, has said that this is as big as Marvel Now, which was Marvel's version of the New 52. And they're calling this initiative Marvel Fresh Start. We only have 2 titles announced, an Avengers book by Jason Aaron. It's a big deal with art by Ed Beginnis because there's like 4 Avengers books right now, and they've announced that this is going to be a book, the only Avengers book out there on the shelves. It's going to ship 18 times per year, so sometimes it will be bi-monthly. So this is a big deal for that publisher. They also announced a Venom title with Ryan Stegman on the art and Donnie Coates writing it, who had been writing Doctor Strange. Now, this comes shortly after Marvel just did Marvel Legacy, which went back to classic renumbering. And that kind of sent a contradictory message because it was talking about being old and new all at the same time, Jerry. Marvel's getting their ass kicked in sales right now. DC owns 8 of the top 10 books. I think Spider-Man, and I can't remember the other title. Maybe one of the X-Men titles.
I thought Star Wars was up there, too.
Well, I'm not counting Star Wars. I'm talking about Marvel superheroes. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about Marvel versus DC. Okay.
Yeah, but, I mean, still, though, I think with Star Wars, they control like 7 or 6 of the top spots right now. DC does. And you can say this is cyclical. But, I mean, Marvel had a stranglehold on this industry for like 12-something years, and DC's finally got it right with Rebirth.
Yeah.
And Marvel's went back and forth with trying to make their characters diverse, balancing that between classic incarnations of the characters. But to hear them say it's as big of a deal as Marvel Now, which was New 52 level, that kind of caught the comics world by surprise, and I did a write-up about that at Geeks Worldwide, dgww.com. Jerry, as a DC guy, I know you don't read a lot of Marvel. Do you kind of just turn your head at this as another rehash, or do you actually take notice here?
I do take notice. I mean, it's interesting how Marvel has had tremendous success with movies. Obviously, I mean, Marvel was ahead of the curve before DC in terms of the shared universe and stuff. And I mean, other than Batman films and, arguably Man of Steel and Wonder Woman, I don't know, DC's movies and stuff just haven't gelled as well. Although, with television-wise, I mean, DC has had a lot of success. But comic-wise, since the New 52, and you can criticize the New 52 as much as you want, since the New 52, DC has really taken a lead again. And they have put out some consistently solid books. And one of the things I've said about Marvel, versus DC over and over is it feels like a lot of the time that Marvel is constantly pushing new characters, which is good. But if folks are going in wanting to read comics about, Tony Stark Iron Man, Bruce Banner is the Hulk, Thor, the classic Thor, you may not find those in Marvel all the time. Where DC... It
can be very off-putting to somebody who sees the movie as an entry point into the comics industry.
Yeah. Now, I know they've done a lot of things. I mean, Marvel's done a lot of things where their comics have resembled their movies more and vice versa. And DC has done that too. I mean, the Rebirth Suicide Squad looks a lot like the movie Suicide Squad. At least it has the similar, cast with it. But
I don't want to cut you off, but I really want to interject there because you just hit on a point that I wanted to make about this. For the past couple of years, they've been trying to make the Marvel comics more like the MCU, which has led to a lot of what I would describe as inorganic storytelling. And eventually that was going to stagnate the MCU because you're going to have less and less quality source material to pull from. And you have to let the comics be their own separate entity, and then that will give you source material for years to come for those MCU movies.
Yeah. Again, I'm reading trades. I'm always a little behind, but continuing to read Rebirth. I mean, I think DC is doing a great job of making it feel like a universe while still letting pretty much every book be its own thing for the most part. Some of the books tie in more than others. Some of them completely have their own thing. So it'll be interesting to see what they do here. Again, I'm kind of always of the impression, and Brad, you already said it, I don't read Marvel comics very much at all. Sometimes I'll read a particular, storyline or trade or, something that somebody passes to me. But I was always the impression that Marvel rebooted pretty often anyway, whereas DC is kind of famously, if they reboot, they even tie it into the ongoing continuity. DC is nuts about continuity. Marvel seems to change things up pretty often. So I'm curious to see what they do. Again, I like the idea in comics of simplifying the things a lot of the time, though. Of doing 18 issues of Avengers versus having, 4 or 5 different books. I was reading a little bit about this earlier, and again, they're moving Black Panther up into the, like the main roster and stuff again. So that was pretty cool. Again, hopefully people who enjoy these things will jump in and read the comics and get, find something there that's familiar that they loved on the screen, and then be able to, move into it a little deeper.
And deservedly so. Black Panther's kind of earned that roster spot. His book's been not top 10, but top 25 over the past couple years since Ta-Nehisi Coates took over that book. So it's cool to see Black Panther on that Avengers roster. Surprising is that Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider is going to be on this roster. That kind of came out of left field.
Captain Marvel. It's a pretty cool team up. To be honest, I was looking at it. I'm like, I would be tempted to start reading this Avengers book. So.
And they say it's more of a clean slate. I don't know what that means in regards to like past history of events. I'm pretty sure things like both Civil Wars will still have happened. I mean, that's what they did with the original Marvel now. Yeah, it was a more of a fresh start than their traditional reboots that they had done throughout the years. But at the same time, they kept their history intact. But what's crazy is this is kicking off the post Bendis era of Marvel Comics right here. So it'll be interesting to see if that's good or bad for the publisher. It could sink them because he's been such a creative force there, or it could be to their benefit because it gets some fresh blood on bigger titles. They're switching every single Marvel created team, artist and writer. No artist is staying on the same book, and no writer staying on the same book. So this is a big move for Marvel Comics, but based on the sales numbers, they really need to do this. So I'm excited. You said trades. I'm reading Marvel stuff more in trades. So I have to say that I'm probably not going to change that. I'm probably going to get my DC single issues. Mm-hmm. And like right now, I'm just getting the Marvel Legacy stuff via Amazon. Kind of what you have been doing with Rebirth. Yeah. That was my plan for Marvel Legacy, and I imagine I'll carry that into Fresh Start. But that's a bland name though, isn't it, Jerry? Fresh Start. I mean, could they not have, that is what it is, but could they not have come up with something a little more creative than that?
Maybe it'll tie in story-wise. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe it will, but I'm going to read those in trades. Except for Spider-Man. I always pick up the individual issues of the main Spider-Man book. So, let's talk about a piece of collecting news and lead into Toy Fair with that. Yeah, Jerry, why don't you handle this story here?
Right. So for
what's
the past
going on with Funko?
Yeah, ever since they started doing it, which I think was in maybe early 2016, Funko has done a number of these crates. You pay so much every month or every other month. These ones were mostly bi-monthly. And you get a box of loot, usually, some Funko Pops and some other Funko toys and, socks or a t-shirt and whatnot. I have been subscribing to the Star Wars Smuggler's Bounty box since it first came out, which was again, I really think it was either November 2015 or early 2016. I know the first one was a Force Awakens box. So anyways, the other day, I get an email from Funko that says, in effort to allow Funko to focus on what they do best, creating unique quality collectibles, Funko will be discontinuing the subscription offering for the first Star Wars Smuggler's Bounty box, for the Star Wars Smuggler's Bounty box on September 15th, 2018. Prior to that date, Funko will continue to offer the box on a bi-monthly basis, but the process is changing. Part of that process is no longer are you guaranteed to receive the box or any future boxes. You actually have to try to purchase them before they run out. Yeah, which one of my
scarcity.
One of my complaints about companies like Funko and Super 7 as well is they really like to rely on these what I think of as early 90s comic book tactics at times.
Holographic covers.
They like to have
cards.
lots of variants and chase editions and insane limited editions and things that I don't know. I know like these places do these, but I've never met a collector who said, "Oh, I love chase editions," or
I
these
have
rare...
his name. Adam Dixon. That has got him into Funko. He's now seeking chase editions.
Well, I think people want those, but I've never met anybody who said, I like the fact that they make something really rare that most people won't be able to find and you'll have to pay out the nose for. But this was nice. Again, I buy some pops. I buy pops that I like, but with Star Wars stuff, I ordered this box, and it's a big deal for me. It's a big deal for my little kid when it comes in the mail, and there's always some cool stuff in there. And, she'll usually snag some of it. And I'm wearing one of the t-shirts right now, pretty much always wearing one of the Funko t-shirts that come in these. It just seems really weird. One, to go ahead and cancel it and turn it into a free-for-all. But number two, to take something like a crate and turn it into a retail exclusive. I'm not sure how that makes any sense. I just can't see that being at retail a box that would be maybe $25 to $30, and people are going to want to pay that much for a mystery box. It seems kind of odd.
Here's my question. Is it going to be like GameStop gets the DC, the Marvel, and the Star Wars box? Or is it going to be GameStop has the Star Wars box, Target has the Marvel box? I'm just throwing stories out.
Yeah, absolutely. Here. I don't know. They really haven't said anything yet, but I don't know. It just seems like a really strange poor way to handle this.
Are they going to, or do you think they will? Because, we don't know a lot about this. Are they going to announce edition size, like say, all right, this month's Star Wars box, we're going to release 5,000 of them?
Yeah, I have no idea.
This sounds like a terrible idea. I guess it wasn't selling the way that they wanted, or the subs were dropping. I used to subscribe to the DC Legions of Collectors box, and I enjoyed that box. I like the pins, I like the patches. I always got a really cool Funko Pop. But one of the problems I had, and you didn't have this problem, is their shirts were... I wear a large, okay? Yeah. I've wore a large shirt for the past 12 years. Almost every single shirt, that will work fine for me. Their large, it would change from month to month. Like, 1 month, a large would be huge, like a double X. The next month, it would be like a tight medium, and I couldn't even wear it. And I know it was different people making the shirts, and there would be like a pole.
See, that's weird. It really bothered me. The Star Wars shirts have been so consistent in size.
Yeah, that. Again, I never got the Star Wars box. I only got the DC box, but it's kind of this. This is. I don't want to say it's a fad, but it seems like not just Funkos, but this subscription box mentality is on the way out, because I can't remember the name of the company. Nerd Block. Do you remember them, Jerry?
The name's familiar, but
They were rivals to Loot Crate, never that big, but
Okay.
you could choose if you wanted like a horror block monthly or a comic block, and they would send you some really cool stuff. But they not only went out of business, but they took a bunch of customers' money and never refunded them, and for a box that never showed up at the end. So
Gotcha.
that was kind of shady there. Do you think that this Funko Pop bubble will burst like the subscription box bubble looks like it's about to?
Again, I mean, the Funko Pop thing, I've heard people, I mean, everybody has said for quite a while since Pops have been out that Pops are going to burst, Pops are going to burst. I think the issue is as long as they are making things that people are actually liking, then I think they're good. Again, I think what's frustrating, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about Funko, but like when they showed the It Pops, again, some of the really cool ones are like, oh, this will be limited to this will be limited to that.
Hot Topic exclusive.
Yeah, and what we're seeing is some of these Funko Pops are just very, very, very difficult to find, produced in really limited numbers. I mean, Pop seems to be doing fine right now. They keep adding new brands. I think there's something about them that they're not terribly expensive, and so people enjoy collecting them. Again, I like collecting them. They're fun to have around. They're low maintenance. You can get some properties that you wouldn't think you'd ever see. But I don't know. I think again, something like getting rid of that crate that people really liked is going to be not such a great move.
Yeah, so we'll see where that goes, and we're going to talk about Funko some more when we get into Toy Fair. So, without further ado, let's get into our main topic of episode 85 of the pod, which is New York Toy Fair 2018. Jerry, I want to start with some big news out of the show, and then we'll go through all the major companies showing and and we'll give our take on how we thought they did, and maybe a few products that they showed that we may be interested in picking up or have our eye on for 2018. Usually stuff you see here at Toy Fair is going to hit within this calendar year, with the exception of a few things that maybe Mezco's putting out there. But let's go ahead and get into big news for me as a lifelong Power Rangers fan. Bandai, who has had this license since Power Rangers debuted in America in 1993, has lost this license, and it was going to be between Jakks and Hasbro, and thank God Hasbro ended up getting this license.
Hasbro had Power Rangers come out at their panel on stage.
Yeah. I mean, how awesome was that? I wrote up a story about this at Geeks Worldwide. I immediately texted you, and we kind of started going over the possibilities of what this could mean for this line. To me, my biggest hope, based on what they've done with Star Wars Black, what they've done with Marvel Legends, is we're going to get collector-based figures, like Star Wars Black is for Star Wars fan, but you're still going to get that mass product, too, for whatever the current show is. Now, these won't hit until spring 2019, but, Jerry, where do you think Hasbro goes with this license?
I think a lot of what you've already said, Brad, is they realize that they have a collector base now. At this point, I mean, even the younger generation that grew up with Power Rangers are now at the point where they're starting to have the nostalgia hit. They're going to, want to pick up collectibles. They have the disposable income at this point. So I think we're going to see a pretty heavy collector's presence. It's going to be interesting because sometimes you have to figure out with something like Power Rangers how deep you can get into the property and still keep collector interest. Like how, in terms of like the later shows, I know the earlier stuff, has huge collector interest. But again, I think Hasbro is going to be able to keep a lot of toys on the shelves and keep new product rotating. I think that's a problem with Bandai, is Bandai was not the best at keeping product fresh on shelves. Their character selection was weird. There would be Rangers that they just wouldn't make sometimes. And again, this has been more stuff in the modern era. I don't think the movie product did well. I don't think the movie did that well either, but I think the movie product was extremely lackluster compared to even with something like Transformers, where, people may have complaints about the movie, but Hasbro puts out a solid toy line for them. So this is a huge opportunity for Hasbro, and probably a really good thing for Power Rangers fans as well.
Bandai never really capitalized on the 6-inch collector's market. Sure, they had some nice figures like the Green Ranger figure they put out.
They were just starting to
get
there.
Yeah, and then, they lose the license, but they did do some nice things with prop replicas. It'll be interesting to see if Hasbro continues in that. I mean, they're doing stuff for Marvel that are prop replicas, like the Thor's hammer, Star-Lord's helmet we talked about, Thanos' glove last week, the Infinity Gauntlet. So I think that's a possibility that they do prop replicas still. Excuse me. What do you think, Jerry? You think they'll still do that?
We're seeing Hasbro put out a lot of prop replicas. So I think we'll absolutely see more Power Rangers prop replicas. Yeah. Although Bandai did a great job with the Legacy series.
Oh, yeah.
Power Rangers Legacy was a great line, and they put out some really nice stuff for collectors.
I hope they do the Sword of Darkness. I would love to see a Hasbro prop replica of that. I will say, I hope for collectors' sake they focus on the monsters, because it was always Ranger focused, which I understand that's what the line's going to be. But, I mean, there hasn't been a quality Rita Repulsa figure really ever produced.
I don't think there has either.
Now, there's
Do you remember the one I reviewed?
That are okay. Oh, yeah, yeah. But that was like a later one. That was
Castaway from the Island of Misfit Toys.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's like, here's their core villain from the first season.
Creepy.
And she's never had a good figure. Even with those Rotocast figures they did back in the day, you never got Rita Repulsa. So if they could focus on, can you imagine if they knocked those monsters out of the park from like the first season or two? I mean, that could be such a huge line. It's not going to be Star Wars Black, but it could be awesome.
And you know who's putting out the best Power Rangers stuff at the moment, other than some of the the Japanese lines, like is Imaginext. Have you seen the Imaginext stuff?
Yeah,
oh my gosh, man! I mean, they're making everybody. They're doing a great job for a kids-focused line. It's incredible.
So that shows you, if you have that license, the possibilities are infinite, man.
Still resonates with kids too. So even the older stuff.
That's one thing. Going into next year's Toy Fair, that's one thing I'll be definitely anticipating. What Hasbro has for collectors for Power Rangers. Jerry, speaking of collectors, one of the hottest lines has been Mezco 112 Collective. I know you are big into this line. You're slowly pulling me into it.
I'm big in this line. I think you're pulling yourself, and you're just using me as your scapegoat.
No. I would not. If I would not have seen them at your house displayed the way that they were, I wouldn't have been pulled in. But I'm trying to stay MCU based. But we can talk more about that in a minute. But I think it's fair to say, maybe I'm wrong in speaking for you on this, but heading into the show, was this what we were anticipating the most to see what Mezco would do with their 112 Collective line?
It was going to be pretty tied between this and Star Wars The Black Series.
Yeah, and I was really, thrilled's not the right word, I was really excited with their showing. I was really blown away with the Hela Thor Ragnarok figure. I mean, that sculpt of Kate Blanchett, it looked Hot Toys level. Also, you got zoom ins on the Incredible Hulk, the Gladiator Hulk, which you can totally tell is Mark Ruffalo Hulk, and the Thor, totally Chris Hemsworth. It just looks like their sculpts for their movie-based properties are getting better and better. So I really enjoyed that. Now, I know that's not a big reason that people get into Mezco, Jerry. What's a big reason that people really get into these figures? And I know it's been an appeal for you.
We've talked about this. You and I have talked about this. One of the things with the Mezco line that I think is part of the appeal is that with their comic-based figures, Mezco kind of does their own take on these characters. So you're looking at something that's sort of a, juxtaposition of multiple different looks that the character has had, sort of, woven into something that's new and unique and exciting. So that's one of the things that while I do pick up some of the DC cinematic, mostly the Batman figures, I have the Harley Quinn cinematic. I really like Mezco's comic-based figures that have their own design. You're seeing something that's kind of unique and different while still having something familiar. On that front, I was a little disappointed with Mezco's showing that they didn't...
Which surprised me.
They didn't show that many new comic-based figures. Part of that is that they already have a lot of them in the pipeline they haven't even put out for pre-order yet. Again, they showed great figures like Catwoman, Batman Beyond, Darkseid, but we've seen these before. Those were showed last summer. The new stuff, the only new things they showed were the Dark Knight Sovereign, or Batman Sovereign, which is, Mezco's doing their own Batman trilogy of figures. This is a middle career Batman, sort of Batman in his prime. It's an awesome looking figure. It's very cool, very new 52-ish. The other one that they showed for the comic-based DC side was Jon Stewart Greenland, which is a really cool-looking figure. Some people aren't completely sold on his outfit. Again, it has that different Mezco look to it that they've given it their own take. But the constructs he has, and like kind of the smoking ring hand that has like the green energy of the ring kind of smoking off of it, just look really cool. I will say with Marvel, there were two Marvel figures that really stood out to me. Cyclops. The Cyclops figure looks pretty awesome, especially with all the different, energy beams coming from his eyes and whatnot. The other one that I will consider purchasing, which of the Marvel figures do you think that I'm considering purchasing?
Comic-based?
Yeah.
The only ones I see are Cyclops and Cable.
Blade.
Well, but that's movie-based. That's Wesley
Is it
Snipes.
really, though? I don't know.
No, Blade's awesome. You're right. I'm looking at a close-up right now.
Again, it seems to be one of Mezco's mixture of... There's absolutely influence from the Wesley Snipes Blade, which I love. That's one of my favorite comic book movies, is still Blade, and Blade 2.
And it's not as clear as like, oh, that's Wesley Snipes is the Hela. That is.
Well, yeah, that one
right,
definitely is a Marvel Cinematic Universe Hela. This one seems to be based on some of the best, the best Blade appearances, and that's one of the best Blade appearances. I love that Blade.
One of the things that kind of surprised me here was that we got the John Bernthal Punisher. Jerry, did you see this? I
did.
Now I haven't finished the Punisher. I'm like 4 episodes in. I'm not the biggest John Bernthal fan, but just seeing what Mezco's done with their Punishers and the few that you have a couple of those in your display case at home, I can't wait to see what they're going to do with this, because his arsenal's pretty insane.
He does not come with as many accessories as any of the previous Punisher figures Mezco's done. I think he comes with 2 pistols and the minigun.
Wow, that's a little lackluster there compared to previous showings.
We're definitely seeing some Mezco figures seem to come with a 112, seem to come with a lot of accessories. Some of them are a bit more bare bones.
I'm wondering if they're going to go the Hot Toys route and you'll see deluxe editions for like $25 more. With a ton of accessories.
Kind of what we saw with the Punisher Fully Loaded, although the basic Punisher came with a lot of stuff as well. So.
Well, we saw Michael Myers here. He looks great. It is like this isn't just Michael Myers. That would have been so easy for them to put out a generic figure based on the John Carpenter classic, but no, it's clear this is straight out of Carpenter's film.
Yeah,
right.
That Michael Myers is incredible.
Yeah, it's really good. And those accessories like the tombstone and stuff, and just the base that has that image of the original poster, it's going to be phenomenal. But sticking with horror, Jerry, Jason, boy, he left a lot to be desired.
Yeah. Again,
oh my gosh.
This is one of the tough things that every now and then you do see one of these figures that Mezco puts out, and you compare it to, you know, the Hasbro Marvel Legends version, or here, you know, one of NECA's multiple Jason figures in those Ultimate Editions, and NECA's looks a lot better. I mean, NECA's looks worlds better than this Jason. So maybe it's early, but... It is early. You know, they showed it off, so if they show it off, I feel like it's available for some criticism. It needs some work. They say 2019. I would say that's more like Halloween 2020. No. We also saw, I know we're wanting to get into some other companies here, but they showed the Ghostbusters again. Do we get them this year? It looks like we're supposed to be getting them as a set of 4. Looks like they're going to sell all 4 together along with Slimer. There was a book that was passed out to... I saw captions of that. Yeah, there was a book that was passed out to folks that had like the pre-order pictures. So it does look like we're going to be getting all of them together. It says holiday 2018. Yeah. So we're talking end of the year. End of the year or in the beginning of next year. You know, holiday does seem to be Mezco's date that they use when they're not completely sure. Yeah. So. One of the things that aggravated me here is they're showing the training Daredevil version where he's wearing the black, which is a cool figure. But they're showing that, and we still don't have a pre-order for Netflix Daredevil, which was shown last year. Yeah, that one was shown at New York, I think, New York Comic-Con, if I'm correct. Yeah, so that's a little disappointing, but I mean, you know, Mezco, this is some growing pains. Yeah, I mean, they're just having to get this under control right now. You know, they're still working on it, so. Yeah. Let's go to a rival company of Mezco. We just mentioned them when talking about Jason, Friday the 13th. Let's talk about the showing that NECA had. And right off the top, right off the cuff, the 2 figures that blew me away were the Pennywises. Yeah, those were the 2 that I liked the best as well. And the Skarsgård. Now, I will only be picking up the Skarsgård because my wife will tolerate it because she absolutely loves that film. And I guess you could say that's her Pennywise, like it is for a lot of people, as popular as that movie was. But I like the Curry version, too, of the character. I can't wait to have both of them. You know, as a kid, I remember Toy Fair used to do wish lists. And I would always, you know, like what they would want to see as a toy line. And Toy Fair, the magazine, not the event we're covering. And I would always, you know, wanted to write my own wish list of, like, you know, my dream toy line was called Nightmares of King, which was like a Stephen King line. And over the years, I've kind of been able to start putting that together, you know, because we had the Carrie figure from NECA a few years back, and, you know, now we're getting a Pennywise figure. So pretty excited. I hope someday somebody makes a Jack Nicholson, you know, as Jack Torrance from The Shining. Even though it's very far from Stephen King's version of the story, I still really like Jack Nicholson in that movie. But the dichotomy that you will have showing off those 2 next to each other, so cool. Just the aesthetic difference, but still being the same character. All the different head sculpts. And that's the thing is, I'm looking at these. They're retailing at Big Bad Toy Store. You can pre-order them right now for $26 or $27 plus $4 shipping. And this rivals almost anything that Mezco showed us. And it's only $30, Jerry. Yeah. I mean, when NECA wants to really push the limits with what they can do, especially with the price range they can do it in, they're still, you know, they're saying, hey, look, we're still here too. Hey, I mean, you know, don't forget about us. I'm really happy with NECA this show. I love Predator and Alien, but over the past, I would say 2 or 3 years, it feels like that's all NECA has done is Predator and Alien. It's ridiculous. And this year, you know, they really had some cool stuff. I love, you know, they're starting a Guillermo del Toro collection, and so they now have a pre-order out for the Pale Man. That's the guy from Pan's Labyrinth that has the eyeballs in his hands that, puts him up to his face. I love Pan's Labyrinth. I'm a big Guillermo del Toro fan. Super excited to see some of these, these one-off horror figures again. They've got a Captain Blake from The Fog, from John Carpenter's The Fog. So they had some really interesting stuff at this convention, and I thought it was a really good showing for NECA.
They got a quarter scale Jason. Now I believe it's from the final chapter, so it's not part 3. But I mean, it looks way better than what Mezco showed with theirs. And I'm not trying to shit on Mezco here,
yeah.
But I mean, NECA. They also had that diorama that they had the turtles on, which yes, they were using it for the turtles there, but there's so many things you could use that for. And I was watching the product walkthrough on Toy News Eye. And dioramas have been a big request. I know they've done a lot of those, like the Predator one that you reviewed on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, it's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, but what'd you think about that? Is that something as a collector you want to see more of, or does that not pique your
stuff
interest?
like that is really cool, especially if you're doing photography or, if you're looking for a way to display something. Something like that can be really versatile and multiple. You can use those with multiple toy lines with a little bit of tweak.
Nothing new really with the turtles here. All stuff that we've seen. I wish we could have saw like a 6 or 7 inch version of those 1/4 scale. Yeah. We'll see if that ever happens. I don't know how that would go with Playmates.
I feel like Playmates has a stranglehold on that license. The NECA's just doing what they can.
Yeah, because they would definitely do those if possible. So NECA had an outstanding show. Speaking of outstanding shows, let's go to Hasbro. Let's go to Marvel Legends first,
all right.
Jerry, and then we can get into a line you said you would never collect, Star Wars Black. Just saying.
Did I say that?
So you said that on episode.
I did. I said I would pick up like specific characters. And now it's like one of the only lines
You're a completist.
I buy everything on.
Oh yeah, and there's some cool Star Wars Black stuff to talk about. But let's get into Marvel Legends, Jerry. This is something, even though you're definitely a DC guy first, you've got into Marvel Legends.
Oh, absolutely. Like. Marvel, I mean, really, if you ask one of the best toy lines at retail, I mean, it's Marvel Legends. Hasbro, their character selection, the depth they go to, the accessories that they put with these figures, the amount of figures that they put out, and Hasbro's distribution on this line is incredible. You can find these figures. I mean, you can find them at places, which is something that you can't say from most retail toy lines these days, where distribution is so awful.
A lot of stuff that collectors wanted going in. Like, I saw a lot of people were talking about that they wanted a Doc Ock, and we actually got to see that. That Doc Ock looks cool, a classic Doc Ock. You saw a lot more of the Marvel MCU, rather 10-year series that you mentioned last week. You saw the Mandarin, which looked great. You saw Yellow Jacket, which looked insane. You saw Roman.
Tony with the Mark 1. That's
cool. It's really cool to see X-Men figures making a big comeback. Now, I know they have been, but I know you had the Rogue that looked amazing, but there's a lot of good stuff here. Like, one thing that really caught my eye was the Omega Red. He looked freaking awesome.
Yeah, the Omega Red's pretty
cool. He's one of my favorite X-Men villains for sure. The Magneto they did, it almost looks like a mixture of his modern suit with his older suit. Is definitely more modern.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see the classic suit at some point, but
Yeah, they did a Venom where it's got 2 head sculpts, an open head sculpt, and then the classic like McFarlane Venom. That figure was a little meh. I don't know. What'd you think about that?
Which one?
The Venom where it has the 2 head sculpts. It just doesn't even compare to like what the Marvel Select one was.
I liked it. I mean, again, for mass market $20, I think it was pretty cool. I liked the Carnage too, though.
Carnage looked better.
Silver Surfer was great. Did you see the Silver Surfer?
Oh, yeah. That Cletus Cassidy, the Carnage Cletus Cassidy sculpt, going back to that was awesome. But
good stuff.
Yeah, but no, Silver Surfer looked phenomenal. I was hoping you'd see a Silver Surfer. It's been a while since there has been one of those. I will say this, Ben Grimm, it looks like you're finally going to be able to complete the Fantastic
I know,
Four.
who would have thought a few years back it seemed like we were not going to see any Fantastic Four stuff from Hasbro.
It's amazing what happens when Disney buys when Disney buys Marvel, which they did when Disney buys Fox. Yeah. This Bishop looks really good. Classic Bishop from X-Men.
Bishop was great. Yeah, I really like Bishop too.
I mean, I'd say out of all the stuff, the X-Men was really what caught my eye. Like, if I had to pick like a character set of the Marvel Legends stuff. So, but I mean, impressive show. And speaking of impressive, most impressive, right? Let's go to Star Wars Black.
Let's go to Star Wars in general. Because we have we really have two Star Wars series. Well, we really have three Star Wars series that are shown off. One, we have the standard, the main 5 points of articulation that Hasbro's been pushing for a while. Two, we have the Black series, which is the 6-inch line that I collect. That's pretty popular. But we also have the return of the Vintage collection, which are going to be, the 1/18th scale figures that are super articulated on vintage style cards that include a mixture of characters from all across the Star Wars galaxy, and Hasbro was starting to show some stuff here finally, so it was really cool to see that line return as well, even though I'm planning to stick with the Black series, but it's nice to see the Vintage collection back.
Now, the Vintage collection, is this the first time that they're doing, because Walmart had their own 1/18th scale Black series?
Yeah, they were
right?
calling those the Black series. So the Vintage collection was around a few years back. I think it ended in, I want to say 2012, right before, the Black series hit. And it lasted for a while. I think it was 2009 or 2009, 2010 until about 2012. And I mean, if you ask most Star Wars fans and collectors, they will say the Vintage collection is the epitome of 1/18th scale Star Wars figures. I mean, they are incredible if you can track them down.
And so now they're just bringing that.
They're bringing it back. They're continuing the numbering of the figures where they left off. It's gonna have Rogue One characters. It's gonna have characters from the sequel trilogy, and then other characters that they just never made before. One thing that a lot of collectors are concerned about is the first series of these Vintage collection figures are basically mostly going to be repacks of figures that Walmart has already had. So we're gonna have Rey again. We're gonna have Jyn Erso again. I think we're going to have, Kylo Ren. And again, not that those aren't terrible sellers, but you can still find most of those figures at Walmart.
I saw them today. I was at Walmart and saw a bunch of
heavy.
Jyn.
So the hope is that the line doesn't get sort of it doesn't become like a choke point where those are all stuck at retail, and then the future lines, future series don't get out.
Yeah, I hope they're not, the peg warmers that stop anything else, like you said, from continuing that line. Because I do remember those now. I remember an Anakin who was a pod racing gear that was phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, they were all
from
very
that
good.
line. So that's cool to see that line making a comeback. Out of all the stuff from the main Black series, like the 6-inch Black series that caught my eye, man, the bounty hunters, Dengar and Zuckuss, looked freaking incredible. Did they not?
And we will now finally be able to complete the Empire Strikes Back bounty hunters. Two of the nicest looking was, all the Solo figures look great. They looked really good here. They really look like they've done a great job on those and improved the likenesses. But the Gomorian Guard looks incredible. He's going to be a Target exclusive. But Princess Leia in the Hoth outfit looks amazing. We've had Luke and Han in their Hoth outfits for a couple years now, so it's nice to finally be able to have these ones as well.
Now, Jerry, are they doing the face printing like they have been doing with Marvel Legends?
That is what just started. They just started doing that. There are three figures out right now. DJ and I think it's called Ray Island Journey. I'm just waiting for mine to show up, and then they redid Captain Rex. That was a HasCon exclusive last year. They redid him with face printing as well.
Okay, so let's talk about the other big news to come out of Star Wars Black. The crowd-funded Jabba's sail barge.
Jabba the Hutt sail barge, yes, is a crowd. Hasbro has started something called HasLabs, which they're going to be using to essentially crowdfund, things that they don't necessarily want to do at retail, but to see if there's interest there. And for a long time, one of the main vehicles from the original trilogy that's never been done as a 1/18th scale vehicle is Jabba the Hutt sail barge. I would say the other one would be the Tantive 4, the Rebel blockade runner from the original Star Wars. So as of right now, they are at 1,521 pre-orders for the sail barge. It has to have 5,000 pre-orders by April 3rd, by midnight on April 3rd.
It was 1,300 this morning.
Yeah, it's moving. I mean, it is moving up there. This is going to be designed for the vintage collection, and this is something people have wanted for a long time. It is 49 inches long. Yeah, so it's about, a little over 4 foot long. It's over a foot tall and a foot wide, and it comes with a Jabba the Hutt figure. It's very cool. I mean, it's a very cool, vehicle / playset / diorama, essentially.
Did you fund it?
I have not.
And so you have to fund it to get it, right? It's not like this meets funding.
It's going to ship in approximately the end of February of next year.
Okay.
I'm really.
Do you think it reaches it?
I'm sorry?
Does your gut tell you that it reaches the 5,000 backers?
I hope so. I hope it does, because I could see that being kind of turned around and used to. If it doesn't, then I think a lot of, what fans say they want may not be taken as seriously by Hasbro in the future if fans don't fund this. I don't collect much in the 18 or 1/18th scale anymore. So I'm really on the fence about, do I want to fund this or not? I do, however, have a weakness for Jabba the Hutt. I have a collection of Jabba the Hutt figures and miniatures and all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, this would look really cool up there. So, but there's so much 6-inch stuff coming out that I'm leery of dedicating my funds to it.
Yeah, that's a big commitment. Speaking of funding and commitment, something you used to be very committed to was the Masters of the Universe Classics line. So, Jerry, let's talk about Super 7. They now have taken over Masters of the Universe Classics after Matty Collector, I guess, kind of, win under's not the right word.
Yeah, they ended it. They ended Matty
Mattel
Collector's
just chose to end that. But what do you think of the Club Grayskull showing in Masters of the Universe?
So they did
7
not show
stuff?
anything we haven't seen before. Everything that they showed has been shown before, has been pre-sold, pre-solicited already. What has happened is it has taken Super 7 much longer to get these out. They're just shipping now, I believe. So for Series 1, they originally put out pre-orders for Series 2 as well. A lot of people commented that it was typically considered bad form to ask people to, commit to Series 2 when you haven't delivered your first series yet, especially when it's something new they're trying. And again, they really use sort of a crowdfunding model. Well, they didn't really crowdfund it. but they did take pre-orders. So I'm excited that I want to see how these turn out. They did release some exclusives for PowerCon that I didn't purchase, but people weren't super happy with them. The plastic quality was kind of a little different. But if they turn out really well, then, places like Big Bad Toy Store and there are collectors who are, selling these. And, again, you had to buy the whole set. You couldn't buy just the ones you wanted to. You had to buy a whole, chunk of 4 figures. So it may be easier to find the ones that you want to pick up if you're trying to kind of cherry pick here and there.
So Club Grayskull is basically Super 7 doing what Mattel did with Matty Collector.
Right, essentially.
Pretty much.
They have 2 versions. They have one that's Club Grayskull, which is like the basic Masters Universe Classics. And then they have one, I think it's called, excuse me, Club Filmation, which are figures that are very heavily based on the cartoon appearances of these characters from the Filmation series.
Yeah. So, besides the Master stuff, is there anything else from Super 7?
Well, one of my favorite lines the past 2 years now has been Muscle. I was a big Muscle collector as a kid. They're those little solid, rubbery, originally based on a Japanese series called Kinnikuman, little minifigures. And Super 7 brought them back in a sense, and we're doing their own licensed properties. I just picked up the Robotech ones. I really like them. They showed off a lot of cool new ones. She-Ra, more Masters of the Universe, Pee-wee's Playhouse. I mean, how random, but I do like that show as well. But, again, one of these weird things is they've been selling them in little packs where you're getting these 3 figures, you're getting these 3 figures. Now they're going to put them in blind boxes and call them Kishi Surprise. So, which is weird. I don't know why they're blind boxing these when they've been selling them so you knew what you were getting.
Seems like an odd move.
Seems like an odd move, and again, it's one of those frustrating. It's like, did we really need to add, more difficulty into this process of collecting these little minifigures? I mean, now do we have to make them, artificially harder to find by making them, randomly packaged?
Yeah. So, Super 7, okay show, nothing like spectacular. I just want to throw in a little Lego tidbit. I don't want to get big into Lego. You don't collect much Lego anymore. But Lego is releasing the Hulkbuster, not a miniature version, like a full-size version, it's not the right word, but a larger scale version, and that's going to be out March 3rd, which is my birthday, oddly enough. Although I won't be getting that for my birthday. It'll be $120. So there's some, I know there's Lego fans out there that go to your site still and that maybe listen to the podcast. So there's your little Lego tidbit. Jerry, let's go to Mattel.
All right.
Specifically DC Multiverse. This is a line you've enjoyed tremendously. You've reviewed a ton of these over at Action Figure Barbecue. They've been better than what DC Collectibles has been putting out in the 6-inch scale. I know it's not quite.
They've put out more product, we'll say. I'm not going to say they've been better.
Well, you're the voice of authority on that, so I take your word for it. So, as far as this showing, I've never collected this line. I've never been into it.
It's kind of a spiritual successor to like DC Universe Classics, if you remember that series. Again, they're adding in new characters. It's very Rebirth focused. It's been very focused on the DCEU and Rebirth at this point, and so we're seeing a lot of figures. We didn't see much new. We saw a little bit new here, but it was cool seeing a couple characters like Spoiler. I mean, this is the first Spoiler figure ever, and Stephanie Brown has been a very significant character in Detective Comics now, but I mean, she's been a significant DC character for years, and the only other Stephanie Brown figure they've ever had was a Stephanie Brown as Batgirl from, quite a few years back that is an insanely hard to find figure and very, very, very expensive. Most of what Mattel showed are actually exclusives that are coming out. DC Multiverse has done a lot of retailer exclusives, but we did see Kid Flash and Beast Boy. They look pretty good. Spoiler and Harley Quinn are going to be at Walmart, so they're Walmart exclusives. We saw the prototype for a Danny DeVito styled Penguin.
Yeah, that looked a little odd to me.
Well, yeah, it's a prototype. We'll see how it turns out. I mean, it really and truly was a prototype because it wasn't even painted yet. So
kind of like Mezco's Jason.
Yeah,
right?
But again, theirs looked like it was further along. I mean, this was very clearly still being sculpted and worked on and whatnot.
I was disappointed because we saw the same Batman Forever. We didn't get the sonar suit. I would have been excited if we could have saw that.
We didn't see that. I mean, the only thing again with the multiverse is their articulation model is still, right now they're just releasing, people call it the Clayface series, and some of the figures in there, like Batwoman, they have double jointed articulation, something that Mattel has not done very often with the DC lines. Most of these figures look like they're lacking it. So Mattel is doing all new sculpts most of the time, but they seem very reluctant to update their articulation to kind of what's standard right now, what we're seeing on like Star Wars Black or Marvel Legends, or even Mattel's own wrestling stuff, which WWE had a great showing. Won't talk about too much because I know you're not much of a wrestling fan. But you know what? I was reading something.
Shawn Michaels looked
I was
cool.
reading something that was that may have been the #1 best-selling toy line this year. In that range was like WWE product.
I believe it. I mean, it's more kid friendly now than the 70s.
And there's tons of. I'd have to look at what it specifically was, but this year it was a huge brand, and so Mattel does great things with that line. I mean, they do a really good job. They have great mixture of modern, the modern roster, and then classic roster as well. They have a big focus on the Attitude Era coming this year, which continues to be.
That's the biggest era in
continues
WWF
to be popular.
history.
But I wish they would take some of that, the pretty decent articulation model they have there, and move it over to DC. Sometimes Mattel's figures can be very uneven, between the different brands that they manage.
Yeah. So let's talk a little Diamond here. I'm not going to get too big into Diamond, but we saw some real Ghostbusters figures, which I thought were really cool. I was a big fan of that show as a kid. That introduced me to Ghostbusters, and then I found the movies as a result of that, because the movies were, I was born in 87, so the movies were a little bit before me. First one came out in 84, right?
84.
I think 84, yep. Yeah. So definitely more in your age range as far as the movies when you were a kid. Jerry's just a tad older than I am, not much. So, did you like these figures, Jerry?
I do. Again, they're a little different looking. There's something about them that's not quite right. They don't look like they're based on the animation as much as they're inspired by the animation.
They look stylized more than anything.
Do, or they almost look like they tried to make them look more realistic than. Which
is odd for a cartoon.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time exactly defining what it is I think about them. I'm very interested. As much as, Ghostbusters and Raiders of the Lost Ark jump back and forth constantly for being my favorite movie. It's Ghostbusters one day, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, the next day. But I don't actually collect a lot of Ghostbusters stuff. I don't really have a good reason why. Maybe because it's...
Will you get the Mezcos?
I don't know yet. I'm not sure.
But you'll think about it.
These are tempting me. These are tempting me because I actually had... I had the real Ghostbuster toys as a kid, And so I have a lot of nostalgic attachment to these as well. I'm looking at these, and I mean, they have the correct colored, the energy beams from their wands, the capture beams. So I'm really liking these. Gosh, I'm really liking them. Looking at them closer now.
yeah, no, I liked them a lot too. I mean, I won't be picking them up, but they caught my eye.
Diamond
so,
had a good showing. I mean, they showed a lot. They're continuing to do the Nightmare Before Christmas line, and I mean, they're starting to get to the point where I'm wondering if they will release more product than NECA did in their line. NECA did a line that ran from like 2004 to 2008, and NECA's line was incredibly deep. I mean, they did a lot of characters from Nightmare Before Christmas. And my wife and I have most of them, but NECAs are fragile. That was an era when NECA stuff was very breakable, and Diamond's stuff is definitely of a better quality and durability. So I don't have many of their Nightmare Before Christmas figures, but I have a few. But I definitely saw places where I'm like, oh, I would buy that figure to kind of supplement what we already have. Lots of DC and Marvel statues too. Diamond was cranking stuff out.
They had some of those PVC statues too. Those are big.
They
are.
Now. I mean, they're a very low cost alternative to what we see with other companies that are upwards of $100 and sometimes upwards of $1,000.
Oh God, Prime One Studios.
Yes, yeah.
Let's talk about Funko now. I don't want to deep dive into Funko here because when it comes to Funko, I mean, I know they have other products. I completely get that, but I mean, when it comes to them, it's all about the pops. Yeah. And
anything you can think of, Funko has a pop of for the most part.
Yeah, so there was a few that caught my eye. I like the Doug Pops. Apparently, the Nickelodeon 90s stuff has made a big comeback in the past year.
I saw a bunch of it at Toys R Us the other night. Tons of it.
Yeah, I seen a lot of it in Books A Million.
I'm a high school. Modern Life, Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Doug.
I see high schoolers as a high school history teacher. I see them wearing these all the time, and I'm like, you were probably too young to even remember this stuff because that
probably
was,
weren't born when that stuff was out.
Yeah, that's right. Most of the kids I teach now were born after 9/11, so they definitely weren't.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, it's cool. That was a great time for cartoons, but it's just kind of weird that they gravitate toward it. It seemed like it would be more people my age and a little younger that would gravitate
Maybe
toward it
Nickelodeon
more
is showing it.
I think there's like a block of it, but I don't think it's like prevalent. But Doug Pops, I mean, you had Patty Mayonnaise, you had Quail Man, you had Pork Chop, you had Doug. Doug was always my favorite Nickelodeon show.
I like Doug too. It would be one of my favorites as well.
Yeah, I like both versions of Doug. There was the Disney one where he was in like middle school.
Yeah.
They were a little bit more mature, so... I thought that was cool. I mean, Smallville Pops, it's really cool they're going back and doing the Green Arrow from Smallville. A lot of people forgot about him since the new show's so popular with Stephen Amell, but the live-action Green Arrow premiered in Smallville, so it's cool that they're doing that. But I mean, that's all I want to say about Funko. Is there anything that really caught your eye from this show?
So Funko's doing some Saturday Night Live Pops, which is kind of funny. I actually had for a while the David S. Pumpkins Pop pre-ordered. I think he should be coming out soon. They had Gene Frankel, which is Will Ferrell in the More Cowbell skit. And then they have Justin Timberlake and Andy Samberg in the very special Christmas box 2-pack. Both of them dancing, what's their names? Rafe and I can't remember. But the song Take a Look Inside, you know the rest. So pretty awesome. Pretty crazy. Definitely a pop that I did not think would ever exist. But
same
here.
Yeah.
But Funko's doing everything. I was disappointed that they didn't show any more Mystery Science Theater 3000 pops, because they released a couple this past year. And they did a great Resident Evil line earlier in 2017, and I was hoping they would show a second series, and they're just kind of, not saying anything about that.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about something I won't be saying much about in the next year, and that's Rise of the TMNT, which is the new Nickelodeon show we talked about a couple of weeks ago when some of the promo art hit for that, which was a little off-putting, but I was willing to give it a chance. Based on Playmate's toy line, I'm not going to be willing to give it a chance. I never want to say that a company shit the bed, but they shit the bed here. It was
someone's gonna have to be changing some sheets.
It was just bad. Like that, a lot of the stuff, and you and I talked about it because theirs was one of the first drops of images from Toy Fair that Friday night, or maybe even late Thursday night last week. And like the Splinter, I'm sorry, he looked like a McDonald's toy. It was ridiculous.
They have a very unusual look to these. I'm not sure how to describe it, but they definitely look less like action figures. And I don't usually like when people say the McDonald's toy. I feel it's just kind of a...
I know. That's a cheap kind of...
Yeah, it's kind of like, you'll see somebody look at something, it's like a Marvel Edge, and be like, oh, it looks like a McDonald's toy. I mean, it's just kind of one of those, hipster, I'm too cool for this kind of things. But I don't know, I mean, these very much look like they're just built to be colorful, and, I mean, you can see some articulation on them, but I like the big pink guy. He actually looks pretty cool. I like the ninja with the scythe in his hand. He looks kind of slick. But the turtles themselves just do not look good. I don't know. There's something about them that I am just not liking in toy.
And once again, nothing for collectors. I mean, we had TMNT classics way back when.
And yet Playmates keeps a stranglehold on this license so that other places... in the U.S., companies cannot put stuff out, but they're not doing it themselves either, so I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you have a whole new market of revenue. Maybe it's just not an investment in talent as far as sculpting and stuff and production that they want to make. I have no idea.
I know Playmates is one of those companies that's synonymous with Ninja Turtles in the same way that Bandai has been synonymous with Power Rangers.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would love to see them, again, I would love to see more companies at the level of Hasbro and Mattel, because I want to see more people competing so we see better and better product. But Playmates, I would very much like to see somebody else have control of the Ninja Turtles license, because I feel like Playmates runs it into the ground every incarnation.
Yeah, so kind of a sad showing from Playmates. McFarlane, speaking of things that used to be great, McFarlane's Stranger Things Ghostbuster figures. I know McFarlane revealed some other product as well, but I mean, that's just what really caught my eye. We had seen these before.
Their Stranger Things line is kind of cool looking.
Yeah, and I really thought that this was a cool concept to release these figures that highly realistic. Looks, NECA level, and I know McFarlane used to be king. Yeah. They probably used to be what NECA is at this point. But I don't know if that's something I'd add to my collection, but it at least made me think about it. So I gotta say that's an achievement for McFarlane. Not much from Walking Dead.
No, they're being pretty quiet on that. I don't know if that license has kind of hit a lack of interest. Again, I mean, McFarlane went into there about 2 years ago, and changed the scale and style of the Walking Dead figures. Which, I mean, if you're talking about a way to, potentially kill a line, unless it's a very established property, that's it.
Yeah, they started as like 5-inch, then
and they went for a long time, and they just kept getting
inch.
better and better and better. And I think people were building, whole rosters and collections, and then they jumped to, that 7-inch scale, fairly unarticulated.
Yeah, they did do some cool stuff with the bat, the Negan bat, though. I had one of those, some prop stuff. So that was cool. I mean, McFarlane, glory days have gone by, but they're still worth talking about.
I really liked their Jareth this year that they did from Labyrinth, the David Bowie character from the movie Labyrinth. I got it for Christmas. Loved it. I mean, again, it reminds me of what NECA would have been doing a few years back in terms of articulation, but the sculpt is really good, and it's one of those odd cases where McFarlane actually did way better than NECA did when they had the Labyrinth license. So usually it's the other way around. Usually NECA takes things McFarlane did in the past and surpasses them. It's like the one case where McFarlane surpassed NECA.
So, Jerry, before we close out Toy Fair, we got to talk about one of our favorite companies, one that's been a little maligned over the past year and a half or so, one that we've actually talked about recently, and that is DC Collectibles, which had one of the first big showings of Toy Fair, and all their stuff pretty much they showed is up for pre-order now at Big Bad Toy Store. Was this a return to form for DC Collectibles, or do you think it still was not up to par?
It was closer than what we've seen. Again, I really wasn't sure what we would see from DC Collectibles. They've canceled a lot of product over the past year. They put a lot of time, really over about the past year and a half. They've canceled a lot of product. This year we saw them release some things. They're really banking on that the DC Essentials line is going to be kind of their next big, I guess you call it an evergreen line, that they're going to continue to add characters to it. We'll have to see. I liked what they showed. My favorite showings of theirs were probably the Watchmen figures. They're pretty cool looking. We haven't seen DC Collectibles do comic-based Watchmen figures before. They were famously supposed to quite a few years back, and the kibosh was put on that, I think, by Alan Moore himself, as far as I know. But now that these are going to be based on, the Watchmen's introduction into the DC mainstream universe, we're able to get these. I'm really excited for them. They look really good. We only saw DC Collectibles do the movie-based Watchmen figures, which were good as well. I mean, they were not super articulated, but they were nice looking figures, and at the time it was amazing to have them. I liked the Nurse Harley and Joker 2-pack. That's the Bombshells design, kind of their take on the sailor kissing the nurse on VE Day, Brad.
Victory in Europe Day.
Except this one, Nurse Harley is kissing Sailor Joker. That's kind of cool. I love the Bombshell stuff. They showed some great statues.
Are you getting the Batgirl Garage statue? Because that's kind of pricey, but I know you're a Batgirl guy.
Yeah, I'm contemplating it. I'm contemplating it. So it looks really cool.
So Jerry, there was some stuff that caught my eye with DC Collectibles as well. The core statues that they're doing, which are going to be PVC based, which we talked about how the PVC stuff is kind of taken off here lately, and I think they could have something kind of cool with that line. I know they've done some of that already, but they've also got some prop replicas out there, a Two-Face coin, a Joker cane. It's already sold out at Big Bad Toy Store, so it's cool to see them dipping their toes into that well.
Remember the Batman utility belt from a few years back?
That thing was sweet. Gosh. The DC Gallery statue, a bit pricey, but the one of Flash and Superman racing, I don't know if I'm sold on the sculpt, but I always enjoy seeing that scene, that classic scene played out. Again, this is a step up from where they have been over the past year and a half, but it's still not where they want to be.
I think the frustrating thing for me with DC Collectibles is these are their. I mean, the company is closely tied with DC itself. These are their characters, and they seem to keep returning to about the same 10 characters over and over again. It's not DC Collectibles anymore. who's doing spoiler, it's Mattel. It's not DC Collectibles who's doing Batwoman. That's Mattel. It's not DC Collectibles who's doing, The Ray or Beast Boy. That's Mattel. DC Collectibles seems like they can only sell Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Nightwing, Deathstroke, The Flash, Aquaman, and, Harley Quinn and the Joker. I mean, that's like this only, 9 or 10 characters that they keep releasing over and over again. And it's just really strange. I don't know what the difficulty is, if it's because, they have problems, getting their stuff out or getting their stuff sold to stores, or their pricing or whatever. But I would hope that they would, offer a more diverse roster of characters.
Well, that's going to be a story to follow in 2018 in the world of collecting. Jerry, it's getting late on the East Coast here, but I want to wrap up with a few, and I know there's some stuff we didn't get to talk about, but we mainly got to all the major companies, in particular the ones that Jerry collects and I collect or have collected. So we've hit the big boys here. So Jerry, let's wrap up with a few closing questions. What was the biggest surprise of the show for you?
The two biggest surprises for me was that DC Collectibles showed off actual action figures. That was a pleasant surprise. I was excited to see that. And Hasbro's Jabba the Hutt sail barge. That was a big surprise to see Hasbro do something so massive, so outside the box, so collector focused.
My biggest surprise was how Hot Toys quality that the Hela figure was from Mezco. I thought that was incredible. So I know that may be a cop-out by me because I used to collect Hot Toys, say what you will. But I don't know. I just who knows where they go with the MCU stuff, if it really takes off. I think it will. We've talked about whether it will or not. So that will be interesting just to see another story to follow in 2018 and collecting. But that Hela was definitely a surprise, that quality. What was the biggest disappointment of the show for you, Jerry? For me, it was Playmates.
Yeah, I thought Mezco had a weaker DC showing than I would have liked. I mean, really, they just showed... they technically showed 3 figures because they showed the Flash, the Ezra Miller Flash. But I thought that was a weaker showing for DC stuff than they've done in the past. DC Collectibles didn't give us any word on... this year they kind of just, again, canceled the Bombshells, Supergirl, Bumblebee, Black Canary, and Zatanna, and we've not heard anything about those. And I would have liked to have heard something. And lastly, the fact that Super 7 is going to start blind boxing their muscle or their Kishi figures is really frustrating.
Jerry, I'm going to have to agree with you on a lot of that stuff. Counterpoint, I'm glad Mezco didn't show too much because they don't want to overpromise and underdeliver when it comes to the product they'll put out. Okay, closing question before we wrap up this edition of the pod. If you could only own one collectible from this toy fair, what would it be?
Well, since we had already seen the Black Series Dengar and 4 Lam revealed before, mine would be Zuckuss. Because with the introduction of Zuckuss into Star Wars The Black Series, we can finish the Empire Strikes Back Bounty Hunters, which was always my goal with the Black Series. Obviously, I've gone full throttle into the line, but Zuckuss would be my number 1 pick.
With that, would you say that Hasbro won Toy Fair, or would you pick a different
I think Hasbro won Toy Fair this year. I think NECA had a great showing as well. I would probably put NECA as number 2 or number 3.
Yeah, NECA really surprised me. My favorite was the Ultimate Pennywise, the Skarsgård edition. I really was blown away by that figure, and it only costed $26 and like $4 shipping.
Hiya, Bradley.
Yeah, it just really adds to that. I agree with you though with Marvel Legends, Star Wars Black, and the crowdfunding aspect,
and showing off that they took the Power Rangers license over. Holy snap.
Oh my god. Yeah.
It's
I mean, how
crazy.
could you say that they didn't win? So a confirmed epic showing for Hasbro at Toy Fair 2018. Jerry, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Confirmed Epic Podcast. Next week, we will be reviewing Black Panther, and we will welcome special guest Amos of the Just Being Amos podcast onto the show for that featured review. Jerry, in the meantime, where can people find more of you on the internet this week?
Keep checking out actionfigurebarbecue.com. That's BARBECUE.com.
As for me, check me out on Twitter at The Real Brad Bell, DREEL Brad Bell, Instagram at The Confirmed Epic Podcast. Catch me at Geeks Worldwide, TheGWW.com, The Epic Review, THEpicReview.com. Go buy our shirts at TeePublic. Thank you so much for listening, downloading, click and play. We greatly appreciate you. It's been another epic year at Toy Fair. And from the Hollywood foothills of North Carolina, we are out.
That's all I have to say about that.
This has been a production of the GWW Radio Network. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Also, check out Geeks Worldwide at thegww.com for all the latest news, reviews, and opinions on video games, comics, movies, TV, cosplay, and more. Geeks, assemble!